So there is a ranch in northern Utah. The ironic thing is, I've been to Arches and Bryce Canyon National Park, and it is only 47 miles away. Skinwalker Ranch has been regarded as one of the most significant hotspots of paranormal activity in the entire planet. In the late 1890s, the original owners purchased the land, and they built homesteads. During this period, there were actually natives who still owned half of the West, states like Montana, Arizona, New Mexico, and especially the northern part of Utah. And the name of this tribe is called the Navajo. The ancient Navajo native Indians had turned on some of their tribe members due to the homestead people that would build their homes on that land. And the homestead people that were on that land would hunt the natives down and kill them. The Navajos who did not turn on their tribe, they would set a curse, and the Navajos could become shapeshifters and take form of any object and animals. This could be the answer to a lot of the paranormal mysteries at the ranch, but it even gets more weirder because the ranch has been known for its strange lights in the sky, creepy phenomenons that individuals have experienced on the ranch, and the unexplained cattle mutilation, which I think by far is pretty far-fetched. Robert Bigelow had purchased the ranch in 1996. The Shermans who owned the land had addressed that their time on the ranch was very strange and traumatic. Terry Sherman was just a farmer who raised cattle. Him and his wife, Gwen Sherman, could feel an evil presence, and it would feel like they were being watched by someone or something. One of the incidents that happened late at midnight was that Terry was awakened by his cattle being uneased. He told his wife to grab his shotgun. They were both on the main entrance steps to their farmhouse, and there was like this massive wolf. Its fur was thick black. Terry had described it as being a giant sloth, but with killer teeth. He had shot it 6 times, and then it ran off to the restricted part of the ranch where a gulf of terrain was. Terry had said it had rained recently, so there were mudslides in the gulf and around it. As soon as they got to the gulf, the animal had disappeared. They followed the paw prints until they stopped. And those paw prints, well, they turned into footprints and led into the abyss. Anytime Terry was by himself, he would feel like this certainty of doom, like he was being watched, this evil presence which is just surrounding him. He would tell the sheriff, who was one of his closest friends. The sheriff would joke around and say, "Well, let me guess, there's aliens on this ranch." Sherman would reply and tell him, "No, there are no aliens, but I can feel their presence." That stopped the sheriff right in his tracks and made him think about everything. That would stick with him for the rest of his life. Terry had asked the sheriff to do some investigation on the ranch, so he had set out and take a look at some of the stuff. Also, during that time, there was cattle mutilation, and it would make the newspapers and articles about the town and the cattle being mutilated. The cattle that they were finding on the ranch, it was weird because there were these full-grown bulls, and their eyes were missing, intestines, everything was gone. There was no blood. It's like someone did surgery on it and just left it. And the only thing that was left of the animal was just its skin. There were no eyes, and there's absolutely nothing. Terry had said that he had seen one of the cattle, well, his team that he had set out, they had seen the cattle somewhere in the fields, and it was dead. Or somewhere around it, they could feel like this invisible object that was just on the ground, and it was in this weird shape. It left this weird like design or texture on the grass, and Terry had described it as a spaceship just being left there, that they try to walk past it, but it would feel like they're being pushed back for some reason. So after that, Terry had definitely believed that there is a phenomenon on this ranch, and he had stated that anytime the ranch gets a visitor, it starts acting weird. So Robert Bigelow decides to make it into a private sector. Of course, when the Shermans were on the ranch, it was already privately owned. They had guard dogs, they had fences, they had everything around the ranch. But the thing is that he made these patrol centers with cameras all over the ranch by Homestead 1 and Homestead 2, which are the two original homesteads that were there when the Navajo still existed. And he also set patrol cameras where the mesas are. And the mesas, well, I mean, usually what happens there is that there's glowing lights on the mesas, weird lights that have been spotted around it. So it was a place to investigate. But what's surprising is that Brandon Fugal had purchased the ranch in 2016, and that is where the Netflix documentary series comes out, which is The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch. The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch had been released on Netflix in 2019. The series has 4 seasons. Brandon Fugal had set up a team on Skinwalker Ranch to investigate the phenomenons. The main guy is Travis Taylor, who had started National Geographic's Rocket City. Travis is also an aerospace analyst and a scientist. Brandon Fugal introduces him to Brian Arnold, who is known as Dragon. He is one of the security members on the ranch. Jim Segala, who is a scientist, and Thomas Winterton, who is the caretaker of the ranch. And lastly, Eric Bard, who is the command center manager, basically means he has installed the cutting-edge surveillance system that constantly monitors the ranch. Beginning of season 1, Travis steps foot on the ranch, and the entire team tries to convince him that, weird stuff is going to start happening. Travis just thinks that it's bullshit. But as the weeks start to just pour in, the weird stuff starts to happen, where he was investigating with a radioactive beacon, and he got burned on his face and arm, which didn't really make any sense, but there was actually a nuclear test site that was taking place in Nevada in the late 1990s, which explains that. I mean, half of it, but it doesn't make any sense for him being that burned, right? And also, when they were on the mesas investigating, where there's been sightings of glowingness all over the mesas during the night, and he had one flashlight, he's pointing it at the mesa, and then there's all of a sudden 2 different lights, one at the other spectrum and another flashing light at the other end of the mesa. But the really interesting thing about this is, right, I mean, compared to like the tests that they've done, so the rest of the seasons all the way to season 4, which is the last season, basically the entire team, they just light rockets into the sky for aerial testing to see if there's anything on the ground that may lead them to something about the paranormal activity on the ranch. They also do radioactive testings, which, there's been extreme radioactive spikes that have happened, which is a little bit unexplainable, but again, right, there's nuclear testing that would have happened, so it still has some stuff to be picked off. But they did try and claim that, well, there are portals that were opening, right, from the sky, and they shouldn't be doing that. They're saying that, well, it's from a different universe, and they're opening and closing, and that's why, some of these things happen, and it affects the ranch, I guess. But I think the most interesting part, behind all of this, and the entire thing that kind of made Skinwalker Ranch what it is, because the first episode of the season started off like this. So they got these cattle, right? So it's a 35 head count of cattle scattered around the ranch in this one area. It's fenced off. So there's cameras all over the ranch, right? So there's, coyotes, mountain lions, wolves, anything. Nothing can actually harm the cows or cause stress to them because there's cameras and they can check it out. But the cows would just stay in this one spot, not really wander anywhere. They would stay close together for some reason, and usually cows don't do that. They usually just wander, they're just eating. They're not close to each other, right? Maybe the calves and stuff would be close to their mothers, but these cows were close, and there was just one cow that was all the way on the other end, and Travis had discovered it, which was also in the first episode of the season. He had discovered that the cow was dead. He had called the team. They had called the doctor to figure out how it died. The doctor did surgery on it, and the cow had died from extreme stress. So it makes you think, right? I mean, they have this cattle, there's real predators that are causing the stress, right? And so you're just wondering what killed it, right? I mean, there's nothing on this ranch that could potentially have killed it. It's not like they wanted to kill the cow just to make a different narrative, because everything started to get boring and they wanted to, really get this intensity to make it interesting. That, oh, there's this cow dead, what should we do? Because later on, in Eric's control room, they had been looking at the footage, and right above the cow, before it died, it was kind of like leaning up. It was almost like doing push-ups, right, before it died. And it had leaned up, and they had zoomed in, and above it, there's a tree, and there's actually a black object. And they tried to block it in seconds to try and see what it was, and it was just this black object that just flew across in stages. It wasn't just like it just flew, it was just in stages. It went from one spot to one spot to one spot, and the cow had just died. This is where it backfires in Skinwalker Ranch, because you see the color of the cow that died was black. And a couple more episodes later, it's the next season, color of the cow was brown, and they had said they left it out for predators to come eat, and they said no predators wanted to eat it, but there's no carcass left of it, right? And the coat of the cow that had died, apparently that they said that it died from being sick, well, it was obviously a different cow, because people started finding out about it, and the color of the cow was brown. So they had switched it off, and then it makes you think that, everything that they've been saying about, the lights. I mean, there's some stuff that makes solid sense, but then there's just other things that just make it, sketchy, and just make it kind of like this show where they try and give, I mean, it's pretty obvious, right? I mean, they try to give each character a personality for them to go out and investigate, to make them unique in their own way. Really, it just backfires, because, when they really put the stuff out, you would think, if it's this, if it's privately owned, right, it's a secretive place, why would you just give, these people access to, video it, and then, of course, make a series about it? But it did drastically bad, and Netflix had season 1, and they did not release the other seasons because of how bad it did. People started finding out that the cow scene was fake, and it just completely ruined Skinwalker Ranch. But there is one thing that makes this entire ranch paranormal, and that is the cattle mutilation. That is completely unexplainable. The cattle mutilation has been dating back all the way to the beginning. Now, of course, cattle mutilation happens a lot to farmers, right? You see it in Texas, you see it in New Mexico, all these different places, but it happens to farms that are located very close to towns. So you could say someone probably just trespassed, but that's not the case for Skinwalker Ranch, because Skinwalker Ranch is a off-road, privately owned ranch. There are no roads, no towns near it at all, right? And if you ever wanted to get to Skinwalker Ranch, you would be walking in a place with no sense of direction. So the amount of cattle that have died on this ranch by being mutilated is mind-boggling. Of course, there are predators that would have killed it, because if there was, there would have been blood spilled, but there obviously wasn't. But these cattle were missing eyes, tongues, right? I mean, they were being dissected, like someone did surgery on them, and there was no blood, of course. And that pretty much sums up the Navajo curse, and that is shapeshifters. From the weird stuff that happens on the ranch, like the UFO sightings and radioactive spikes, the cattle mutilation is the one thing that is unexplained. There is this actual hardcore evidence, from pictures to newspaper articles, that dates back to when the Sherman still owned the ranch. Even when Robert Bigelow was still operating the ranch and the security and stuff, and these images are all on the cattle mysteriously dying. So this Navajo shapeshifter curse basically owns this ranch. minus all the other side ventures, this is the only, I guess you could say the last piece of the puzzle, right? In reality, cattle mutilation that happens on Skinwalker Ranch is the only phenomenon that is unexplainable on this planet. And if you look at the bigger picture, Skinwalker Ranch and cattle mutilation are one of the wonders off this planet.